it sounds like you're like, well, I'm paying all this money. I've got to really make this thing work. Like it really better work out. And then you got it in there, you started seeing results. What was that process like? Because you essentially took yourself from, I don't really know much about StemWave at all to I'm successfully treating patients on a daily basis. How hard was that ramp up? Was it 30 days? Was it 60 days? Was it a week? Walk us through that.
Yeah, so I definitely did things a little bit the hard way. And when I talk to providers and they have established clinics, I'm like, okay, even if you've only been open for a year and a half, 6 months, you have a jump on the situation that I was in. This was literally opened up the keys and a few weeks later got the device delivered and just started making it happen. So no established patient base, social media marketing with StemWave actually were my only lead sources. And, I went to a training, I went through some of the online courses, and I obviously used it on myself and some of my friends just to get an idea of what it felt like. And really, I had it in my office for a week, saw my first patient from a Facebook ad and got results right away. And in the first 2 weeks of having it, I mean, not to put a number on it, but with a no established patient base, just social media, brought in 5,000 in the first 2 weeks, which
Wow.
doesn't happen typically in a
No, it
practice.
doesn't. I mean, you literally just got the keys for this place. You
Yeah.
had no established anything, you know. So that's pretty crazy. And then, you open this clinic, you're all of a sudden seeing patients. Like what types of patients are you seeing? What types of cases were you seeing with this office, whether it be a month, 2 months, 3 months into it?
For me, I saw a lot of knee cases to start. And
Mm.
that was partially due to some of the ads that we were running. They were more focused on knees. So of course that attracts that. And I'm in Florida. We have a older population. And this was even the slow time of year. This was, May when snowbirds are usually leaving and going back up north. So typically in Florida, healthcare slows down in the summer. Well, that's when I started. So also, people could look at that as a negative, but it still worked despite all these odds. It wasn't an
Yeah.
issue. So I think, the knees were really common, spinal conditions, shoulders. Those were the most common things that I first started with. And I really had a lot of confidence in, handling spinal pathologies just because I really had like, show me any type of imaging spine related and like I guarantee you I can read that better than 90% of other providers out there just due to the reps I've had. But I was still able to get improvement, 30 to 50% on a lot of these conditions, especially extremities that I wasn't able to do a whole lot for. I mean, they got a little bit of relief, but it took a lot of time and it was minimal. I mean, this was doing one treatment, getting patient off a table, and their squat depth increased significantly, and they had a reduction in pain by like 50%. And I was like, "Are you sure?" Like at first, I would kind of double check. I stopped asking that after a while because I was sure. So.
And then once you became sure and you became certain of what was possible with StemWave, what were your expectations going forward from a clinical standpoint? What did you expect for most patients coming in?
Yeah, I mean, I was able to predict results within a visit or two. I think being able to really be able to identify with that patient what their pain point is, and then set proper expectations was huge. Because you get a device and you're not 100% sure about its capabilities. So you start seeing some of these cases and you get more comfortable with what the expectations are. So you set those proper expectations and you hit those time and time and time again. So once I started to do that, I was like, okay, I want to do additional marketing, really double down on this. And I want to see it all. I mean, I want to
Mm.
see hips, shoulders. I want to see carpal tunnel, lateral epicondylitis. Pickleball is huge here. So everybody is having like, lateral epicondylitis and medial epicondylitis issues, knee problems, plantar fasciitis. I mean, the whole gamut. And I just really wanted to kind of double down on that and expand all the conditions and really kind of tap into the potential. So I wanted to test it out and see, okay, these are
Mm.
great, but what else can it do? So
And what was like, so you're saying just within a couple visits, you were seeing anywhere from, up to 50% improvement after a while. You're like, okay, I should just expect that and predict that going forward, which is great. We see that with over 450 offices that we work with. But over a course of an entire care plan, walk us through how that care plan looks. You have a day one visit with somebody. How long does that take? Then how many visits are you seeing? And what are you expecting through a whole care plan with StemWave?
yeah, so I think that that can be a little bit dependent on as far as the time it takes and what your first visit looks like. It can be dependent on how you have your practice set up. So for me, it was literally one large room, just me. I didn't have a front desk staff, I didn't have an assistant or anything like that. Now, a lot of practices do have all these things, so they're able to leverage that support and make everything happen even faster. I mean, to be honest, the limiting factor to all of this was me, because I can't duplicate myself. I will figure that out one day and I will be super productive. But my first visit really involved making sure that we're able to get a clear picture on what they're experiencing. How is this actually impacting their quality of life? Because that's important. When people are paying good hard-earned money for a device, they expect results. And the pain point creates the price point that you're going to set, and then there's value associated with that pain point. So you got to make sure that you're really understanding how this is impacting them, what's happening, what they've tried before, and then getting a clear picture not only on what's happened in the past, but what their expectations are for your treatment. Make sure that you're in alignment. So I talk to them about that. I run through their history. I do an exam. I was reserving about 45 minutes for that initial encounter because I wanted to make sure that I gave them a lot of time. Now, do most clinics need that amount of time? No, you could probably do it in 20, 30 minutes max. But for me, I really wanted to take the time, and especially in the beginning, while I was really getting a clear picture, and make sure that I understood that, doing the evaluation and then doing that initial treatment. I would always kind of assess where they at before, do a treatment, see where they're at after. I was getting great testimonials with that, which then I could leverage for additional marketing, which was huge. And then also, the amount of relief that I was able to get with that first visit was significant, 20, upwards of 50%. After that, it was incremental improvements over a period of time. I really have seen that a lot of conditions respond really well in that 8 to 12 visit range. Obviously, there are exceptions. Some maybe a little bit more, some maybe a little less, but a wide variety of conditions. The most common things that I see respond really well in that range. And it's slow incremental improvements over time that have a compounding effect. And you set that expectation up front because this is more of a regenerative and healing modality. So this is not a quick fix. This is not a one and done. They get great results to start, which is really helpful when, they want to have those expectations and, the hope of that improvement over time. It's great to get those quick results. And then you explain what they can expect over that treatment plan. And constant communication is the most important thing that I would say, is telling them, where are we at? Where do we expect to be? This is what we're going to do today, and guiding them through that process. And I had nothing but 5-star reviews. I've never had a business where you got nothing but 5-star reviews. There's always somebody that will complain about something. I haven't had that yet. And I think a lot of that comes down to results and communication, honestly.
Yeah, I think if you can have great results, you can be a great communicator and a good executor. That really is all you need to do. And the reason being is our company, StemWave, we already took the time and spent the money and the resources to make a machine that can do a lot of the heavy lifting. And guess what a machine's going to do? It's going to show up every day and do exactly what it was designed to do, right? It's not, it definitely malfunctions less than a human would.
It's a workhorse.
So yeah,
Yeah.
it's a workhorse. That's right. So let's get into the financial side of things. A lot of people are curious, how does this compare to physical therapy or chiropractic services? Like, how do you price this out? How do people charge for that? How does that all work?
So I think pricing can be dependent on a few different factors. I've had clinics that I've spoken to that maybe they're in a more rural, underserved area. I have found that my blue collar workers are like my best patients. So, and honestly, even my Medicare patients on a fixed income that have really chronic degenerative knees and shoulders, and it's affecting their quality of life. They're the ones that are motivated to have that improvement. And, so I think, pricing can be dependent on the area that you're in, the confidence that you have, what your overhead is. I mean, all of this kind of plays a role in, pricing things and running a business. My pricing may be a little bit higher than others, but I get results and I back it up. So I'm providing a value. My office space is very pleasant to walk into. It has a great atmosphere. It reflects, the service that's being rendered. But, I typically recommend, pricing this according to body part that you're addressing. So usually I price it 1, 2, or 3 body parts and have incremental increases in the pricing accordingly. I very rarely do, individual pay as you go types of payment options, but I will break up payments, half up front, half in 30 days or what have you. Or even offering financing options to patients like care credit or cherry financing, things like that, to make it a little bit easier. So, I definitely think there's a range on average, I would say between $1,000 to $2,000 for a care plan, getting in that 8 to 12 visit range. And, that's rendering services on average of 8 to 12 visits over a 2 to 3 month period. Healing takes time. So I make sure that I set that expectation up front. And you got to kind of start with what you're comfortable with and what you can think you can demand of that demographic. And that may increase over time. I mean, I can get into specific numbers if you want me to,
Yeah.
but do you want me
Well,
to do
I'll
that?
say this. I'll kind of give an idea. We've worked with, like I said, 450 practices at this point. So I can tell, the audience that the average price point that people end up at is anywhere from $100 to $200 per session. Average number of sessions is going to be anywhere from 8 to 12, probably more on the 10 to 12 side of things in most cases. So, we can see care plans per area ending up anywhere between $1,000 to $2,000 per area. Now, obviously, we can offer discounts on that. We can make adjustments if we need to. But my point in saying that, Jen, is a lot of the practices we work with, they hear those numbers and they say, wait, that's more than I'm charging for my services right now. And they're a little bit nervous and reluctant on that. And I'm curious what your general reaction is to that.
I think that a lot of, especially chiros, PTs, a lot of people are used to more that insurance-based model of practice.
Yeah.
And honestly, you're underpaid in that model. We all know this. You have to make up for it in volume with numbers. And that's why a lot of providers want to have cash-based services, because they want to make more income with the, results that they're providing. So with this, typically with chiropractic care, it has great efficacy. You can get great results with a wide variety of conditions. And I will say this because I am a chiropractor, I get better results with StemWave. And I'm a pretty good adjuster. It's not due to a lack of ability with adjusting. I think adjustments are great. But we're talking about a totally different mechanism of action. Rehab and exercises, corrective care, all of it's great. It has its application and it can be utilized, all of this in combination with StemWave, which can just amplify the results that we get for people. But again, the pain point that a patient has creates the price point because there is value associated to that pain point. And I think that that's really important. And if you take the time and understand that, then you can not only provide great results for a patient, but also have additional income into your practice, and patients will pay for that. And many times they will not bat an eye. So I think that not having something like this and not incorporating it into maybe what you're already doing, adding it as an add-on to your services, as a standalone option, depending on what your practice model is, it's really a win-win for everybody from a business standpoint, provider standpoint, and patient standpoint as well. So it's really just kind of, I've had providers say, oh, well, my patients will never pay for this. Well, I think that's just a mindset shift that the provider needs to have. Don't make those decisions for your patients. Let the patient make the decision for themselves. Give them the option, show them what this is capable of, let them feel it, experience it, and make that decision for themselves. Because I've had people come in that, are mechanics, are factory workers, are retirees on fixed incomes, and they make it happen because this is whatever that condition is, it may be having that significant of an impact on their livelihood or their quality of life. And you can change that for them and they will pay for it. So it's a limiting
Yeah,
mindset that I think we need to have a shift with.
I think that mindset shift is an important piece because it leads me to another point, which is what we've realized in working with so many different practices is most practices unfortunately cater to an extremely narrow demographic of any given community. And what I mean more specifically is if you're a chiropractor, for example, only 11% of the population has visited the chiropractor in the last 5 years. And if you're a physical therapist, it's not much better, by the way. Only, I think it's less than 9% of Americans have visited the physical therapist in the last like 10 years. And so these offices are catering to an extremely narrow demographic. But what StemWave does is it acts as a beacon of hope in a sense, because it allows them to now tap into one of the two adult Americans that are suffering from some sort of chronic or acute musculoskeletal condition, as reported by the CDC, right? And so the shift in mindset goes, well, I went from being able to help a small group of people to I literally could help 4 to 5 people standing in the grocery line in front of me. And so I'm curious from a mindset perspective, Jenn, how did this shift the way that you looked at running a practice?
Yeah, honestly, it was, again, it was more of I'm the limiting factor because I can only see so many people in a day. It wasn't really a thought of, oh my gosh, how am I going to get patients in here? It was, how am I going to see everybody that I want to be able to see and, get them the care that they want to have? I mean, I could have one of these down the street from me or across the hall. I don't really care. There's so much potential and so much need in the community and just in the population in general with such a wide variety of applications that, the patients will be there. And there's a lot of different ways you can acquire patients. I mean, now I'm pretty much mostly referral based just because, I've gotten results for so many people and they send people want results. That's what they care about. So really it's just been, how am I going to be able to take care of all these people with just me?
Yeah.
So that's why I would really like to be able to see this and as many offices. I don't care what the discipline is. I don't care if you're an orthopedic, a podiatrist, a physical therapist, a chiro, it doesn't matter. As long as you're qualified to assess people, you're able to treat them appropriately and get results. I would love this to be everywhere so that we can, offer people an alternative that they haven't known about or had before. And the potential is infinite, in my opinion.
Yeah, I strongly agree. The potential is absolutely infinite. So you mentioned something that I want to expand on, which is earlier on in the call, you mentioned that it was pretty easy for you to, get up and going at this. But a lot of people have bought other devices in the past, and that absolutely has not been their experience. In fact, most experiences that people have with other technology is they buy it, it's then shipped to their office, it arrives, and poof, the company disappears. They never hear from them again, and they're not exactly sure what to do and how to get the best clinical benefit of it. How has your experience with StemWave specifically been different? If you could talk about the community, the training, and the support that our team offers here.
Yeah. That honestly is, I think, one of the beyond a great device that works, like you need that. But the support that's provided between the online learning platform on school, you have a community board, you have, coaching calls that you can be a part of. And any new provider that's not on those coaching calls or not at least watching the recordings is missing out on so much information, because you're able to leverage the experience. A lot of people are like, oh, well, how do I know how to set expectations when I first get this device? I haven't used it before. Well, you have a group of providers that have been using it for a long time, and they do have that experience. So you lean on them for that. Group training, I think it has a huge impact. That was one of the first things that I did. And that kind of laid the foundation for me. But then watching the videos, getting on those coaching calls, asking questions to my account manager, and even when I was looking into the marketing, having that dedicated, that done with you marketing program was helpful as well, because it gave me additional ideas on how to acquire new patients when I was first getting going too. I've never worked with a company, a device, anything that's provided this much support and this many different ways on this many channels, ever. And I think that that's a huge differentiating factor, because a lot of times we're small business owners and we live in a little bit of a vacuum in a way. And you could feel isolated in that regard. It's just you, or just you and your associate, or your staff and your practice. But you have access to a whole community with StemWave. And you can ask questions from on the clinical side, from a business side, from a marketing side, any given day at any time, and get that support. So you feel like you have all of these additional resources that are just at your disposal. So I think that's one of the biggest differentiating factors between this and anything else, even just besides, the device in and of itself actually being, so effective.
100%. And, something big that people ask us when they hop on a call with us for the first time, or they've heard about our product, is they're like, well, I saw in some advertisement that I could try it in my office for 60 days. And if I don't love it, I don't have to keep it. What's that all about? I mean, here's the deal. Like, it's in the 450 offices that we've worked with, we give 60 days for an office to evaluate and go through our process, to go through our training, to go through their setup with their office, to go through trying it on their patients, to go through generating cash flow, pricing it out, to do the whole thing. And if they don't love it for any reason, they don't have to keep it. No questions asked, right? It's something that almost no other medical device company is willing to offer. But we've had a 98% success rate. That means less than 2% of offices have said, well, it doesn't make sense for me. I've worked with a lot of different companies. I've been in a lot of different organizations and commercialized a lot of different technologies. 98% success is it's like an A+, right? So we're definitely doing something right there. And I'll show anybody who's on the call to give you guys an idea of what Jenn's talking about. This is an online community with a depth of training on everything you could possibly think about, from knees to ankles to wrists. And these are in-depth trainings that go through every part of it, right? Explain every little detail that one would need to know about how to address these. And if that wasn't enough, there's a whole community here of people asking questions, delivering value, provider near me, this, that, the next thing, contraindications. You can ask any question that you want to. In the next, I've got a couple things that I want to do before we wrap up here in the next probably 15 minutes. Is we've got a list of questions from people who emailed us before this call, and this is like their burning questions that they have about StemWave, about the integration, about all that stuff. So if you're here with us live on Facebook, if you're here with us live on Zoom, if you've got a burning question as well, you can just drop it right in the chat, or you can turn your camera on and you can just ask the question. If you've got it, that's fine too. If you're on the Facebook Live, you can just drop it in the Facebook Live and just let us know. Otherwise, we have a variety of different emails. So as you guys are getting those questions ready, feel free to direct message them to me or just drop them in the chat. But I've got one final question for you before we shift gears to the audience questions, Jenn, which is, if you're a provider if you sat down with a provider who's on the edge of their seat and they're thinking, things are already pretty good in my clinic, but I know I need to do something different, whether it be for cash flow reasons or whether it be for the reason that they're seeking a new solution for their patients. They already have good care, but they want to get even better care. But they're nervous. They're nervous that this is going to take a lot of time. They're nervous that this is going to be a big investment for them. This may be a bigger purchase than they've ever made. What advice would you give for somebody who's on their edge of their seat and they know they want to do it, but they're just not sure if they can make it work?
One, I would say that this is not an expense, it's a revenue generator. So I think, again, mindset shift with that. And that is true very, very quickly. Part of the reason for that is the fact that it is different than other modalities and that you do get results very quickly. So patients have that buy-in right away. Super important aspect of it. Beyond that, what are you gonna do? I would ask them, what's your other option? These people, maybe you're getting 70%, maybe you're getting 80%. How could it impact their life if you got them 90%? Are you having to refer some of these people out? What kind of impact are you missing out on, not only for your clinic, for your staff, for yourself, but also on your patients' lives and their quality of life? Are you missing out on income because you're referring out on some of these cases and that patient's getting an injection or they're getting a surgery where otherwise maybe they stayed in your office? So I think you got to look at it beyond just yourself and think about the bigger picture. You have the ability to utilize it in your office for 60 days and you can send it back if you don't like it. You're gonna like it. But you
Yeah.
have the option if you don't. So no love lost if that doesn't work out. But I'd really lean in on how many more people are you going to be able to impact? Because you get into the medical field, yeah, you need to run a business and you need to make revenue and you need to keep the lights on. Super important, right? But a lot of times people also get into this field, and I don't care what specialty they're in, because you genuinely want to make a difference for people and you want to help them. So if you have the option to do that and bring something in that is a safe modality, creates a huge impact on life, creates significant results, and avoids a lot of more dangerous interventions, why wouldn't you? That's my bigger question. Not you need to because of all this, but well, why wouldn't you? And when I ask that, and I can be very direct when I ask that, a lot of people are like, I don't know. It's like, okay, let's get out of our own way and just make it happen, because there isn't a reason why not to, honestly. It's just, you just need to start doing it. And it's not a cumbersome thing. It's not going to take a ton of additional time and effort. You can make this work quickly and effectively and get results and increase revenue. And you just need to start doing it. It's like going to the gym.
Yeah.
Just go.
You just got to go. You can't think too much. I mean, you made such a great point, which was it's going to cost them either way, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whether you have the technology or you don't have the technology, it's either going to cost you money in form of a loan payment that you make on a medical device you just purchased, or it's more than likely going to cost you a lot more in lost revenue, in lost opportunity, in patients that you could have helped, which, by the way, is almost always more costly than a small loan payment in which our average provider is getting a 7 to 12x monthly return. So with that in mind, let's shift to some of these questions that people have. So I'll start right from the top. Jenn, I don't know if this is a question. I don't know if you have experience with this technology, but one of the main questions is, what's the difference between this and laser? How does this compare to laser in a practice? I can answer that as well if you need.
Yeah, I mean, I can just tell you I had a class 3 cold laser and one practice. It was okay for some things. I think certain devices have an application. Depth of penetration is nowhere near, this is the semi totally different mechanism of action. And in addition to that, patients don't experience improvement right away like they do with StemWave. So it could take, 2 visits, 3 visits, 4 or 5 before they feel anything at all. which, in my opinion, is to its detriment, because a lot of patients want to see it and they want to see it right now. They want to feel it. They want to feel it right now. So I think the application is limited. And it's just, it can be a good modality for a few different things, but I think, and what I also know is most of our providers, anybody that's gotten StemWave that has a laser, I don't care what type it is, it usually is not the most commonly used technology once they get StemWave. StemWave usually crowds it out and this becomes their main girl.
Yeah, that's definitely what we've seen too. And we've really boiled it down to a few key things, which is your experience, beyond the mechanism of action. There's going to be a few key differences you're going to see with laser versus StemWave. The first is the immediacy of results. You're generally speaking not going to see immediacy of results with laser. With StemWave, it's actually a pre-qualifier for patients that you do see some sense of improvement. So we should be expecting that. Number two is, as a result of the immediacy of results, generally speaking, most practices are able to charge a little bit more, much easier. And so the prices people are able to charge with StemWave is, generally speaking, a bit higher because of the results we get early on and because of the consistency and predictability of the results. The third reason is sometimes laser can be quite unpredictable. And while there are cases in which it is a great fit for, some cases where really feels like we're playing the guessing game and we're really hoping that we get great results, but it's a bit of a distant reality in a lot of cases. And as a result, many providers end up pricing their services lower. They lack a ton of confidence in their clinic with the technology. And that is the exact opposite case with StemWave, which is StemWave's job is to create predictability, predictable, consistent, reliable clinical outcomes that allow you to successfully have confidence and, sell services that you can feel confident charging the price that you deserve for. So that's really the main difference between this and laser, depending on the type of laser you have. At least that's what we've heard from multiple other offices. Another question I have coming in here, Jen, is what's the difference between this and radial? I can jump in here if you need to. I don't know if you have experience with radial technology.
I learned early on whenever I was using another device, it wasn't a radial device, but I already knew not to get that based on the types of things that I wanted to treat, because I learned very quickly it actually wasn't a true shockwave. For one, it created trauma for the patient, which was an issue. And it just wasn't going to have a significant depth of penetration. It didn't have a regenerative, any type of regenerative response for the patient and the tissue that we were addressing. Wasn't an actual shockwave device, which is what I was looking for. And it had limited application and more contraindications. And it honestly hurt a lot of people to have it done on them, and they didn't want to move forward with it. So all of that I learned when I was doing my research up front. So I never got one because that's not what I wanted to do. So
yeah, a radial device is not a shockwave device, and unfortunately, at this point, probably a third of people actually who purchase StemWave either have experience or have a radial device, and they're like looking for an upgrade because the radio unit they got was just not what they were looking for. We've got a question that just came in that said, what's the difference between StemWave and piezo wave? Is it just a more effective, is it just a more focused beam? Happy to touch on that, but Jen, I know you have experience probably talking about both as well.
So that's the device I did use previously.
Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. Hey,
Yeah.
we're not, listen, it's fine to talk about other shockwave technologies. They all have clinical efficacy. So
Yeah, and one, I will say there was zero training. So it was literally dropped off in my office. The guy put it over, my shoulder. He's like, "Oh, you feel a little something there?" I'm like, "Not really." He's like, "Oh yeah, that's what it's supposed to be like." And there was a ton of different heads and applicators, and to be honest, it was a little confusing on how to even utilize it. So that was X number one. But you know, I try to learn a little bit more on my own. The depth of penetration is not anywhere close to what you're able to get with the stem wave. The focal zone is completely different. We have StemWave has really great videos and classes that really have good illustrations showing that. And then honestly, even updated research even shows that one, the mechanism or how it actually works and the technology is utilizes crystals to be able to then bounce off that sound wave, but it may not even actually create a true shock wave either. So, you know, minimal depth of penetration, a little bit complicated to use. The focal zone is a lot smaller, doesn't have as much of a regenerative effect, so a different mechanism of action versus a true electrohydraulic device, which is StemWave. So a few different things. I didn't get the outcomes. I just didn't. You
Yeah.
know, I thought it was okay. It was okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll touch on that as well, and then I'll touch on this next question because I think we've stirred the pot on different types of shockwave because I see someone
Sure.
coming in there saying electromagnetic, what's the difference between this and that? What's the difference, should I get radio with it? So I'll cover a few things on this. So I'm going to share a graph that Jen just mentioned real quick, or not a graph, this is just from our website.
Kind of like an
But
infographic. Yeah.
yeah, an infographic. When you're using a shockwave, there's an area that the therapeutically affected area within the patient is what we describe as the focal zone. When you're using an electrohydraulic shockwave, that focal zone is just going to be considerably larger and deeper. And so this is stem wave. This is like 99% of electromagnetic devices. The design of an electromagnetic device, you can't get the focal zone very large. Same thing is true for piezoelectric. Same thing is true for radial pressure wave. And more importantly, or equally as important, the peak energy output just can't go nearly as high. Therefore, the depth of penetration is not as well. Now, what does that translate into with practice? Translates into a few things. Number one, it becomes hard to identify areas of damaged tissue and inflammation. If I've got a laser beam and I'm sending that into, someone's AC joint, and I'm having trouble recognizing if they're feeling anything, well, that's going to be hard. But if I have a focal zone that's the size of a pen, well, it's going to be pretty easy for me to find that area, and I'm going to be able to be pretty effective at determining that area of damaged tissue and inflammation. And so that's what StemWave allows you to do. Now, the second point on that Jen alluded to is there is a ton of research coming out that came out in 2023 and then a little bit in 2024, both showing that electromagnetic, that piezoelectric, and that radial pressure wave do not form a shock wave. And it's unclear if they provide the strong regenerative effects that electrohydraulic technology does. We could absolutely have an electromagnetic technology. It would probably be cheaper for everybody. We could even have a piezoelectric technology, and maybe it would be cheaper for everybody as well. But when we're talking about clinical outcomes and when we're talking about outcomes for patients, we definitely don't want to go with cheap. We want to optimize for the best possible outcome, especially when we're referring to regenerative medicine and the category that StemWave is in. So that's why StemWave is designed in the way that it is. The actual depth of penetration for StemWave is about 12.5 centimeters. So you're going to find when you go to like an electromagnetic unit, it's probably going to be very similar in terms of depth of penetration, but depth of penetration is super important, but not the determining factor. If you can think about 12.5 centimeters, there's not really a musculoskeletal structure that you're going to be treating that's 12.5 centimeters deep. In fact, that may almost be overkill. With that being said, what's much more important is that we have an electrohydraulic unit that has a design and function that can cause the regenerative effects that are necessary. You combine that with a company that offers the right training, support, and resources, you're going to be setting yourself up in your office up to get great clinical outcomes. So that's really the main difference here with StemWave. And as we're kind of wrapping here, if anybody has any last questions, now would be the time to shoot them in, just because we're coming up on the clock here. And I know Jen's got an important day to get back to, and I'm just an interruption to her. But with all of that said, I want to thank everybody for coming today, wherever you're coming from, Facebook Live, Zoom, wherever you are. I want to thank everybody for coming a ton. And if you're at a point where you're examining this technology, and you're looking into this and you're saying, I'm still wondering if this is the right thing for me in my practice. I'm still wondering how I can get started. I'm wondering what the next step is here, or, really what I should do. Few things for you. Number one, any office who would like to can evaluate this technology. To be clear, we don't work with every office. It's part of the reason why we've had a 98% success rate with the last 450 offices we work with. So what I'd recommend that you do is you go to our website, you can go to StemWave.com, you go to schedule a demo right in the top right corner. And simply put, you'll schedule a call with somebody directly on our team. It's not going to be your typical sales call. We'll actually just be evaluating on the call what your practice is, who you serve, what types of patients you help, and we'll ultimately be finding out if StemWave would be able to serve your community. And if we find that there's synergy, we can talk about that. But for a lot of offices, it's not always a great fit. In the event that it is a good fit for us to talk about helping your community, you'll have the opportunity to try StemWave in your office at no cost to you for 60 days. What does this mean? It means you get to try the technology out with no down payment, no cost, no nothing like that. And if for some reason you don't get the awesome results that we talked about here today, and you don't get the results that Dr. Jenn told you that she experienced in her clinic, both financially, but more importantly, clinically, if you don't experience that, you don't have to pay, you don't have any loss or any risk or anything associated with that. So to get started, super simple. I'm going to drop a link right in the chat right now. You just go to StemWave.com. You can click the link off of the Zoom. You can go schedule a demo right in the right-hand corner, and you'll speak to somebody on our team. And with that, again, I want to thank everybody for coming. Most importantly, I want to thank you, Dr. Miller, for being gracious with your time and allowing us the last hour or so to talk through your experience with StemWave. So thank you so much for that.
Very welcome. Thanks for having me.
All right. Bye, everybody.